I'm Scott Wilhelm, and this is a build that I built for the February build challenge month, Rover. So I ended up wanting to go big because it was a leap year. I had 29 days instead of 28 days. So this is 29 days of struggle and pain and suffering to just build the biggest rover that I possibly could.
It's all about that extra day when you've got a build like this.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. I actually posted one picture on the 29th and called it Leap Year Rover, as if maybe that extra day, made all that difference.
So tell us kind of the story behind this. What's the kind of the purpose for the vehicle?
So I had been sitting on these 8 wheels. I was like, these are just excellent wheels. They came in just a few sets, and I had 8 of them sitting around. And I always wanted to build something really big with them, and this just seemed like the right time. So I lined them up on my desk, and I kind of put together a little sketch model of this windscreen, and I really just went from there. So it evolved into way, way more than I thought it was going to, just starting with those simple components. I just went for it from there.
Yeah. Absolutely, and one thing that makes this so incredible is the lighting, but then there's also tons of interior in here, right? So you can kind of take that apart and show us?
Yeah, definitely, not a problem. So the coolest thing about it is that there are the modular style spring bricks that allow you to pull a piece off, and you're still able to light it, but as you pull it off, it still maintains that playability. Yeah. So working with the cockpit, I wanted to do like some nice ambient floor lighting and kind of shine upwards, and then you can kind of see a light in the actual windscreen so at nighttime you get a nice glow that kind of radiates out through the actual plastic, and it ends up giving a nice kind of aesthetic. So we also have some collapsible solar panels that just kind of fold out.
Even the little blinking light inside there, really nice subtle detail.
Yeah, I mean, who knows who's going to be flying overhead? You gotta maintain that visibility. Speaking of flying, there's also a small drone with a control console for sending it out on sorties. So the idea was kind of an exploratory rover, so I wanted to have that ability to give them a little bit of just ability to kind of spread out and explore. So that was kind of where that came from. But the panels continue to come off, and there's labs and living spaces, and just hopefully everything a minifig would need on an exploratory mission.
I love how you've got fully fleshed out rooms, even though this is a vehicle here. It's very impressive to see all that in there.
For sure, it was a lot of fun to try and modularize this. So if you look at the sides, there's kind of separations between the modules. The idea was that they could just take this entire module and do whatever they needed to. So you could have, instead of this flatbed, maybe some kind of spacecraft launch pad or whatever else you needed for that mission. So the modularity was kind of the thing that really drove me to build these in a way that they can come apart and still be playable, but still look like they had a purpose and that they were designed to do this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. How did you sit down and just kind of design one room at a time each time you would start building, or how did that come together?
So laying it out ended up being kind of weird because in between each module there is a sliding door. So I wanted all the connectivity, but I also wanted it to be to make sense with where everything was. So you kind of dead end in the sleeping quarters, so that's not kind of like a pass-through. So that kind of just placed that piece where it wanted to be. The lab is a little bit weird because you do have the airlock to go into it, but you also have just another sliding door here, which maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, I'll just put an emergency exit only thing up there. But so, that's the only one that I'm not 100% happy with, but everything else, really, I wanted to have it look like this is something that you could walk through and have everything kind of where it would be in a real life situation.
Yeah. So you got the sleeping quarters down here. It looks like, is there even some bathrooms in there?
Well, you got to have bathrooms.
Absolutely.
Lego is even learning that. You're seeing a lot more of that in their official sets. So it's it's a necessity, and it's good to see that they're thinking about those kinds of things.
And then what was the room next to that?
So this is on this side. There's just kind of some storage, and then I was thinking like a med bay, maybe a little bit of kind of biology lab sort of thing. And then it just keeps going.
The bottom section is kind of one longer corridor under there.
Yeah, so the lower level, the idea was that there's kind of a machine shop down there, there's spacesuit storage for doing some exploration, and then you have the engine room towards the rear.
Wow, that is super impressive.
Yeah, so it actually is motorized. So there's 2 XL motors, 2 large motors, and then there's a differential that you can see through the small windows. I threw a light in there so that when it's running, you can actually see the differential working, see the kind of gear reduction I had to go through to get something this heavy even to move. So I really wanted to highlight that. So there's kind of a diagnostics bay there where they can kind of look in and make sure that the gears aren't stripping out or whatever minifigs do. And then of course you have to have rovers inside your Rover. So
yeah, the lighting adds so much here, and it just lets people really appreciate all the little details you've included down in there.
Yeah, there's definitely things that are easy to miss. One of my favorite details is just a little bit of accent lighting, so you see your spacesuits down there.
And so you said this is full, you can drive the vehicle, you said?
Well, I drove it last night, and all of a sudden I started hearing a lot of clicks and pops. Okay. So I will say in theory it drives, yes. But yeah, it moved a little bit, and then it started just having some issues. So it's definitely a very, very heavy creation. So the motors, they have a little bit of trouble. Maybe I'll do a tear down and fix it, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. And then what are some of the just kind of exterior details around the outside here?
Sure. So this gear actually is just a tool, like a human tool for working the rear hatch. So when you attach it, you can actually see the linkage that hooks up to Lego string, and what it's going to do is retract this roof. And as that happens, there's pulsing lights that'll turn on to, just be there for safety and make sure that the minifigs know what's happening. There's also a rotating kind of alarm light that will do the same thing as it's going up, and then once the cycle is complete and it's closed, it'll turn off. So yep. We'll go ahead and do that.
Do you build that without instructions? Yes. And that's how they do that. There's no instructions for any of these things. That's crazy. Let me know when you get super.
That is such a smooth design. I love that. I saw the light kind of flashing in there like you said.
Yeah. So the Lego string is wearing out. I've probably done this about 100 times this weekend. So I might have to pop the hatch down just a little bit. But yeah, we'll have to replace the string once I get home, because you can actually see that it's getting a decent amount of play. But the mechanism is pretty fun to play with. So, and then the same thing happens over here. So these are actually elevators. So as you lower this, these lights are going to pulse as well, and then they'll stop once it reaches the bottom. And then same thing on the way up, you get a nice pulse. So yeah.
Spectacular. I did want to go back to the back section you took off earlier. If you want to bring that back real quick, just so we can talk about that and kind of what you built into the sort of crane, almost like a cargo section back here. Make sure you get that back on properly.
Yeah, it's actually the last part that goes on, and I always forget which stud it's supposed to align with. So we'll see if we can make it work. There we go. So the crane was just to, once I had a flatbed, well, this is pretty high up, right? So you need something to get all your supplies down and, start your mission. So I wanted to have a boom trolley that was functional, so I did that. So this gear operates the boom trolley, sometimes, maybe. So it just traverses back and forth along the boom. And then, of course, you have the winch to raise and lower, which is this gear. And then there's a linear actuator to kind of raise and lower the boom, so that does that. And you have the slow-moving worm gear, so it takes a lot of turns. And I might have wanted to put a bigger gear on there, but you get the idea that, it's a crane. It does crane things.
There you go. I love that there's so much playability and movement in the midst of this, even with all the lighting and everything else you've included.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun to figure this out. And underneath here, if you'd like to see the bottom, you can kind of see a little bit of the support structure that happened with incorporating these features.
So yeah, nice behind the scenes look at kind of how you get all the gearing and pieces in there.
Yep. So a lot of Technic parts, a lot of doing research into actual cargo cranes just to see what goes into these things, what kind of functionality it needs to have. I actually learned the term boom trolley. I had no idea what the piece that goes back and forth along the boom was, and so just even real life learning happens building with Lego, which is one of the great things about it.
Yeah. Spectacular work here. Thank you so much for all the time you put into building this, and then also for taking us through the whole thing here and just kind of showing us the inside. I love to see this and can't wait to see more from you in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. That's why I bring it here to share. So really appreciate you guys taking the time.